some netizens commented that Western countries are anti-immigrant, and there are many Chinese immigrants too. So why don't you discuss the problems caused by Chinese immigrants and instead focus on criticizing Indian immigrants? I want to say that there are indeed many Chinese immigrants, and some low-quality individuals may have a negative impact on local society. However, Chinese immigrants have never caused serious damage to local social order. Otherwise, given the relationship between China and Western countries, these topics would have long been hyped up as hot issues. Take Canada as an example. The wave of Chinese immigration started earlier than Indian immigration, especially before Hong Kong's return to China in 1997, when many Hong Kong residents immigrated to Vancouver and Toronto. In Richmond, a city in the Vancouver area, the Chinese population is nearly half. Because some local stores only had Chinese signs, white residents once protested. These were minor conflicts and were quickly resolved through municipal coordination. Chinese immigrants have never disrupted or monopolized specific industries through malicious competition, nor have they caused a deterioration in local security, let alone littered everywhere, defecated in public, or frequently been caught stealing like some Indian immigrants. Chinese culture is different from Indian culture. In Chinese culture, stealing is considered extremely shameful, and unless someone is desperate, stealing is a psychological barrier they cannot overcome. I must say that 20 years ago, China's sanitation level was far inferior to Canada's, though it was certainly much better than India's today. Some early Chinese immigrants also had bad habits like littering or spitting, which were complained about by locals. But when faced with criticism, Chinese immigrants chose to acknowledge their mistakes, improve their behavior, and integrate into local society. In contrast, when Indian immigrants face criticism, they often accuse others of racism without considering how their actions severely disrupt normal social order. In Chinese communities in Canada, such as cities like Richmond, housing prices continue to rise because Chinese communities signify good order. However, once a community becomes Indianized, people of other ethnicities will not hesitate to move away because the consequences of Indianization are well understood. This is not only true in Canada and the US, but also in Singapore and Malaysia. If there are too many Indian neighbors, most people will choose to move away immediately. At its peak, the Chinese population in Malaysia reached 40%, and even now, their proportion is significant. Yet Chinese communities have never been hotspots for crime or poor sanitation. On the contrary, Chinese communities are often relatively upscale areas. Singapore, where Chinese people make up the vast majority, is one of the cleanest countries in the world. Today, China surpasses Western countries in infrastructure development and urban sanitation. Chinese people have built their country into a clean and modern nation, and at their immigration destinations, they also abide by local social order and work to build a good second home. In traditional Chinese culture, self-discipline is a core value. There is an old Chinese saying, "Cultivate yourself, manage your family, govern the country, and bring peace to the world." Improving personal character comes first, followed by caring for the family, then focusing on national politics, and finally addressing international affairs. Therefore, Chinese people value their reputation highly and will not easily sacrifice their honor for profit. However, Indian culture is starkly different from Chinese culture. To be honest, the fundamental reason India has become a graveyard for foreign investment, with international capital withdrawing on a large scale, is that the Indian government lacks credibility, and Indian businesses and individuals also place little importance on their reputation. Indian society is a moral abyss where fraud, violence against women and even female animals, falsifying academic credentials, littering, and public defecation, behaviors that would face severe condemnation and legal consequences abroad, are seemingly taken for granted. I recall an Indian netizen commenting on my channel, saying that I often criticize Paki Sharma, but my channel's traffic is far less than Paki Sharma's, who earns big money while I can only envy her. Honestly, Chinese people would be ashamed to say such things because money is not the only measure of a person, nor is it the standard for judging right and wrong. Paki Sharma has profited greatly by lying, which, by Chinese cultural standards, is a great shame. But in Indian society, as long as you have money, you have moral superiority. You can use money to buy anything, bribe officials, and gain extraordinary legal status. Poor people or those at the bottom of society live like animals without dignity in front of the wealthy. They are not only bound by the caste system, but also stripped of dignity by poverty. So, whenever they have the chance, they will not hesitate to mortgage their houses and land, fabricate false immigration documents, or even smuggle themselves into other countries. But please remember, the purpose of Indian immigration is different from that of Chinese immigration. Chinese people immigrate to pursue a better living environment and a better life. Once they arrive at their destination, they work hard, abide by social order, accumulate wealth, and change their and their families' fates through sweat. However, Indian immigrants leave India to reverse their disadvantaged status at home and exploit legal loopholes in other countries to maximize profit. They immigrate to other countries not to build a home, but to pursue more profit. They only care about money, and as long as they can make more, they will do whatever it takes, regardless of other ethnic groups. So, even after leaving India, they continue to engage in fraud, theft, littering, and public defecation. Their immigration goal is money, and changing these habits does not significantly improve their earning ability. Therefore, wherever they go, they often have a catastrophic impact on local social order. To be honest, some people accuse me of racism, which is a bit excessive. I am merely pointing out the flaws in Indian culture and the fact that Indian people do not value credibility. If pointing out a group's shortcomings is racism, then who will address the social conflicts they cause? If Indian people do not like being criticized by people in other countries, they can return to India and stop disrupting the social order and natural environment of other nations. If these people are still rational, they should seriously consider why India, which claims to be a superpower, receives no respect from the US and has been repeatedly humiliated. Why is India, a so-called superpower, the dirtiest country on earth? If you cannot cherish your own homeland and make it clean, how can you cherish someone else's homeland when you immigrate? If the consequence of your immigration is turning other countries into places like India, do you think people in those countries will agree? To be honest, the social conflicts caused by the uncivilized behavior of Indian immigrants abroad harm not only Indian people, but also Chinese people and other immigrant groups. Take the recent anti-immigration protests in Australia as an example. Once large-scale demonstrations break out, hostility toward immigrants spirals upward, ultimately harming all new immigrants. In fact, many Chinese people who have immigrated to Canada, especially those who gave up their Chinese passports long ago, now deeply regret it. Canada is still a great country, but they are well aware that it is rapidly becoming Indianized, and they are worried about the future. If recent Chinese immigrants feel this way, imagine how those who have lived in Canada their entire lives must feel. So, I hope Indian people stop comparing themselves to Chinese people. You should compare and ask why. With both nations having 1.4 billion people, China is so clean and modern while your country is like a shithole.